Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It is 5 o'clock. I want to get started soon. I might give it another minute here, see if anyone else is going to join us. Just real quickly, if you don't mind, can you confirm that you can hear me up in the upper left of your screen? There should be a Q&A window. You just enter into the Q&A window, and if you could let me know if you can hear me, that would be great. It's not looking like anyone's hearing me at the moment. Okay, that's good. Looks like people are starting to hear me now. Okay, thank you very much for confirming. Let's give them, hope you don't mind, we'll give them another couple minutes. I know that it's hard for people to get here right at 5, but we'll give a couple more minutes for some other people to join us. Make sure that we have a full house. So I will put myself on mute briefly, and I will be back in just a moment. Thank you. Okay, we're going to get started 5 after. So hopefully everyone is here, and looks like hopefully we'll have a few more people join us. I know we had more registered than we've got here so far, but let's go ahead and get going. Just one last time, I want to confirm everyone can hear me okay. If you could shoot me another quick note. Make sure my mic is working. I don't want to do this whole webinar and have you not be able to hear me. So again, welcome. My name is Ian Ellis. I am with Wealth Management Strategies. We are the partners with the ACG to manage the benefit program that the ACG has come out with this year. And so we're pleased to be here. We're pleased to be talking today about one of what I think is one of the best, most exciting benefits available is the Physician's Life Income Plan. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit, and let's get going. Get onto the right screen here. Okay, so real quickly, I want to go a brief program overview. I haven't gotten any responses on anybody. Can you hear me? If anyone could just shoot me a quick note. I had a couple people that shot me notes last time. If you wouldn't mind shooting me a note again, just to let me know that you do, in fact, you are hearing me. That would be great. Just want to make sure that you're getting me. Okay. Looks like everyone's coming back in that we can hear. Okay, good. So real quickly, an overview of the benefits program. Now, as you know, the ACG benefits program is new. It's just been launched this year. And so we've talked about a couple of things. This is actually our third webinar. Today we are going to be covering, as I mentioned, the Physician Life Income Plan, and we'll get into more about what that is in just a moment. We've already done webinars and talked about the high limit disability insurance, the surplus disability insurance program that's available through Lloyd's of London. That's a recorded webinar. It's available on the site. It's also available in a number, I think that emails have gone out. If you want to get some of that information from us, feel free to call us or email us. We also talked about the company retirement platform. So this is 401k, 403b, profit sharing plans, those types of things that you want to implement in your practice for all of your employees. So that's a platform that's available as well. We talked about that on our last webinar. A couple things we haven't covered yet, we'll be covering in upcoming webinars, is a group benefits plan. This is things like long-term and short-term disability, vision, dental, some of those types of things, again, that are offered to a group. Sometimes they're voluntary, sometimes employer paid. There's a really good program available. We've actually got some ACG members already up and running on that and saving them an enormous amount of money for the practice. Another thing we have is an online kind of financial tool. It's a vehicle where you can kind of plug in all your different accounts and things online, helps you kind of manage all of your online resources and stuff, all your financial accounts and insurance contracts and trust accounts, and you can give access to CPAs. It's actually a really neat tool. It's really valuable, and we're offering that for free for ACG members. That's something that's normally we charge clients for. That is something that we'll come out with, and we'll talk a little bit more. It's already available now. These are all available now, but we'll talk more about that in a future webinar. And then, of course, personal business planning. We at Wealth Management Strategies, in our capacity as a full-service financial planning and wealth management firm, have agreed to offer planning services to ACG members. For the most part, those planning services would be free. In certain unique situations, there might be charges for the planning, depending on how complex and the extent of the deliverables. But for the most part, our consulting and planning advice is free to ACG members. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more into Physician's Life Income Plan. I'll try and keep this brief. I know that everyone has busy evenings and they have things to get to, so I don't want to keep you on the call all night long. If there's any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. I'll also have a Q&A section at the end. We are recording the webinar, so we'll post this, and you'll get a link and a follow-up email where you can view it and stuff like that. Okay, so diving in here to the agenda. First, I'm going to start talking about what a non-qualified retirement savings plan is, because that is essentially what we're talking about here through this Physician's Life Income Plan. It's a non-qualified retirement plan. So we're going to talk about what that means, and then we're going to talk about the problem that we're trying to solve for here, this retirement savings gap problem that is faced by physicians and other high-income earners. And then we're going to just dive in a little bit more in detail about what is a Physician's Life Income Plan and how it works and how it kind of works to solve or address that savings problem, that retirement gap. Then we'll get into the details about the offering through the ACG and what you're able to do. We'll walk through an example and show you some funding and some numbers. And then we'll talk briefly about the applications in practice. This means the different types of practices, solo practice, group practices, and how this tool can be used in different ways. And then we'll briefly talk about what you need to do if you want to get some more information. And we will have a Q&A at the end, okay? So if there's no questions now, before I get started, I'll jump in here to the what is a non-qualified retirement savings plan. So non-qualified plan, excuse my my cheesy graphic there. It's hard to come up with some graphics that work well for savings. So anyhow, so a non-qualified plan. This is a type of tax-deferred retirement plan that falls outside Employee Retirement Income Security Act guidelines. Now, the ERISA or ERISA guidelines are the ones that regulate our traditional retirement plans. These are things like 401ks, 403bs, 457, those types of plans you're used to having at an employer. Or if you are an employer, the plans you're probably already offering to your employees. Those are heavily regulated through the ERISA and the Department of Labor. These plans do not fall under that umbrella. So there's some different unique features that these plans offer us. These are designed to meet specialized needs usually for key executives, other select employees, owners of the firm or the practice, and in this situation today, even for you as an individual, it doesn't have to be an employer-sponsored plan in this circumstance. So they're designed really not to be for the masses, but to be for the select individuals and kind of the top individuals. They're usually employer-sponsored, but they're not always. And the vehicle we're talking about today, this Physicians Life Income Plan, this can be employer-sponsored, but this one can also be individually owned and does not have to have anything to do with an employer. And that's actually one of the greatest benefits of it. Okay, so I want to jump into now, what is the retirement savings gap? Because this is the problem that we're trying to solve for. And as you can probably already tell by the graphic we have here, the retirement savings gap is kind of three components. First, we have our desired income, that blue section there. The point being here, most of us want to retire on all or most of our pre-retirement income. You know, there's some traditional theories out there that you need 80% of your final income in retirement. The reason it's less is there's assumptions that some of your expenses are less, kids aren't at home, maybe your house is paid off. However, in our experience working with clients, expenses often go up, if anything, because there's more travel, gifts for children and grandchildren, college things you're helping out with. Those types of things happen where your expenses don't usually go down. If they do go down, it's not usually by 20%. But even at 80% of your income, with what you're making today as a physician, whether you're working in a hospital system or you own a clinic or whatever it is you're doing, your income is significant. You have worked many years, have a lot of education, a lot of work to get where you're at, and you're being rewarded financially, and you have a good income. But the problem we have then is the two pieces that traditionally make up your retirement income are Social Security, which we know is not going to be sufficient to replace your income at the levels that you're at. You know, Social Security, if it's still the way it is today, you might be seeing $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month max. While that's nice, it's nowhere near enough to replace the income that you're earning now, and especially won't be enough to replace the income you'll be earning when you're in your late 50s or early 60s or whenever it is you decide to retire. So that will not be sufficient to meet your income goals or probably even your most basic living needs. The other component that's traditionally part of your retirement savings plan is a qualified plan. These are your 401ks, your 403bs, the plan you probably already have now. And these are good plans. They give you some tax deferral in the current year, or tax deductions in the current year, and the money in there grows tax deferred. The problem is, and as I'm sure you've experienced, you're limited to your contributions. So those contribution limits can really make it difficult to save enough to replace your pre-retirement income. That limits currently this year it's $18,000 a year if you're under age 50, or if you're over age 50, you're limited to $24,000 a year of contribution. Well, if you're making, you know, $500,000 a year, $24,000 a year is less than 5% of your income. And everyone needs different amounts, but as far as traditional wisdom, or as far as the association of, I'm going to blank on the name of the association, basically Certified Financial Planning Association, I can't remember the exact name, recommends 15% of your income, if I'm remembering correctly. So you're not going to get anywhere near that with qualified plans with current limits. So this creates the gap between Social Security and the qualified plans together. You will not be able to save enough to replace the income you're making now. And so that's the problem that we're trying to solve for. Again, if you're just joining us, a couple people have joined in here. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me. On the upper left of your screen, there's a Q&A button. You can click that and shoot me a message along the way, and I'll try and answer the questions out loud. If you want me to answer privately, please just note that in your question. Okay, so this is the problem we're trying to solve for with the Physicians Life Income Plan. Our inability to save enough with qualified plans and the insufficient nature of Social Security to provide for retirement for physicians that are typically making anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million, $2 million a year. So what is the Physicians Life Income Plan? Let's get into that quick here. Okay, so the Physicians Life Income Plan, and stay with me here. The PLIP, which is what we call the Physicians Life Income Plan, utilizes a tax-deferred corporate-owned life insurance policy. And yes, I'm going to read this off to you and then I'll explain more. It's designed to mitigate potential income gap, helping you retire a significant percentage of final income. It's focused on cash value accumulation inside a variable universal life insurance contract. So the PLIP is using a life insurance contract as the vehicle to fund this goal. Now, the reason it's doing that, there's a number of reasons, and we'll talk about those in just a second. Now, this is not a typical life insurance contract. I think many of you are probably familiar with, or you've heard about the idea of using life insurance to accumulate cash value because it's got some good features. In the past, these have certainly been used in personal planning, and they're still used today. One of the drawbacks being there's typically some early surrender charges, which limit your access to your cash. The costs can be kind of high. None of that exists in this vehicle. All right, we're using what's called a corporate-owned life insurance contract. Even though in this case we can own individually, these contracts were designed for ownership by corporations to accumulate tax-deferred assets on their balance sheet to fund things like executive non-qualified deferred compensation plans and other features like that. I won't get too much into the history about where these things came from or why they are built the way they are. The bottom line is you're getting a lot of the tax benefits you get out of life insurance contracts without a lot of the strings that were attached typically to these policies when they were individually owned. So let's talk a little bit about why we use this. Cash values, so for those of you that don't know, some of you know already, I apologize if you do know this, but bear with me. When you put cash inside a universal life insurance contract, which is what this is, the money inside that contract as you fund it can be invested. In this case, it's a variable universal life contract, so you have investment options in there and you can choose how to invest it. The growth of that money, that capital inside those accounts is tax deferred. So you do not get taxed on growth like you do inside a regular investment account. You can move positions, sell the cash, invest, take it out of one investment, move into another investment, do anything you like. You don't trip any sort of gains or taxable events anytime you're moving money around, just like in a 401k, as you're familiar with. Your money's in your 401k, you can move it around, invest in different things. You never get taxed on the growth while it's still in the 401k. Okay, so that's how this works. Now, the way the insurance contracts work, as long as we follow certain rules and guidelines, we can actually access that cash later in life for retirement income without paying tax on it either. So from that perspective, it works a lot like a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, where we put the money in, we don't get a deduction in the year that you fund it. So it's not like a 401k where you get deductions. So it's what's considered after-tax dollars going into the contract. But as it grows inside the contract, you're getting tax deferral, which means you're not paying tax on the growth. And then later, when you pull it out, you can do so without paying taxes as well, just like a Roth, okay? So you can avoid taxation on all that growth. I know that was super quick, and it's a lot of information to kind of absorb at once. Hopefully, we'll compare it to some things that help you understand it. It works like a Roth. But I'll go through some more features here. It's accumulation-focused plan design. What this means is these contracts are not built and designed to be good life insurance contracts. When I say that is they're not providing a high death benefit and a high leverage on your dollars for your death benefit, because that's not what they're designed for. We're using the tax treatment of life insurance to create an account that you can accumulate tax-deferred money in, not necessarily get a good leverage on death benefit. So don't think of them like a death benefit. Realize these were designed specifically for what we're using them for here. They were designed for accumulating cash value, okay? Now, this is where we start to get some nice differences between this and your qualified plans, your 401k. There is no contribution limit in this plan. As you know, 401ks are limited to $18,000 a year if you're under 50, or $24,000 a year if you're over 50. Excuse me, let me drink some water real quick. So those annual contribution limits don't exist in these plans, which is why we can use these to solve for that retirement savings gap. You can put 50, 100, 500,000. You can put as much as you want in these contracts. Now you need to decide up front so that we can design the plan properly. But as long as your income supports it, you can put a lot of money in these plans, and that can help you kind of solve for that gap. Another really nice difference between this and a qualified plan, there are no age penalties. So in a qualified plan and a 401k, if you know, you can't access the money in your 401k before you're 59 and a half. Or if you do, you pay a 10% federal penalty and state penalties, depending on your state. So you could end up paying 15, 20, 30% penalties plus full income tax. So it could be over half the money that's going to get taxed and penalized before you get any of it out, if you try to pull it out of a 401k before you're 59 and a half. However, that does not exist in these plans. So in a physician's life income plan, a non-qualified plan, that penalty does not exist. So you could access the money at any age. So if you start using it and you're accumulating cash value, and let's say you're 48 or you're 50 or 55, and you want to buy a vacation home, or you want to help your son with medical school or your daughter with medical school, whatever it is you're doing, you can access those cash values penalty free. And that's another great feature. As I talked about earlier, there's no direct surrender charges. That means you're basically immediately liquid in this money, in these accounts, unlike traditional life insurance, where you have surrender charges the first 10 to 15 years in these contracts, which can limit your access to your cash. That does not exist here. Here you have full access to your cash early on, and I'll show you an example later where the numbers show that. And like I discussed earlier, you get tax-deferred growth in these vehicles, just like your 401k. And you get tax advantage access to cash values. That's what we talked about. As long as we follow the right rules, you can pull cash out of these contracts without paying any tax. Another couple important points. Creditor protection in many states. So it's not all states. In about 30 of the states, all of the assets you put inside these contracts, if it's inside life insurance, which is what this PLIP is, it is protected against creditors. So if you ever got sued and you had some sort of liability that you had to pay for, they could not come after the money you have inside this plan. Doesn't matter how much is in there. Different states have different rules, but for the most part, that's going to be the case. And we can walk you through your specific state if you want to contact us after and ask questions about that. But that is a huge advantage in the states that this applies to, because you guys are in a high liability business, and there's always a chance that your assets are at risk. And so any way we can come to protect those assets is a great tool, and this is another reason this can be a really valuable vehicle for you. And last but not least, this is the investment options. This isn't all of them. This is just an example to show you that these aren't no-name investments. These are all the major investment managers and mutual fund managers that have funds available to you inside these contracts. I think there's something like 180 funds or something like that. So that Alliance Bernstein, BlackRock, Invesco, Ivy Funds, Fidelity's in there. All of the major fund managers that you'd be used to seeing in a 401k or somewhere else like that, you have access to through this vehicle. So these are good investment options for you. Okay, so hopefully that made some sense. This is my only slide on what the physician's life income plan is, and I know sometimes because of all the terminology we have to use, it can sound confusing. It's really not that confusing, but you're using a life insurance contract. The key is, don't think of it as life insurance with a big death benefit. Remember, we're just using the tax code of life insurance to create a cash accumulation vehicle here. It is, of course, still a life insurance contract. It has to be to get all these advantages, but that's what we're doing. We're accumulating cash value inside this account, and we'll walk through some of the costs of that later. Okay? Any questions before I keep going? Looks like we're okay. Again, if you do have any questions, in the upper left-hand corner, a couple more people have signed on since. If you do have any more questions, stop me anytime. Upper left-hand corner of your screen, there should be a Q&A box or Q&A button. You can click that. You can shoot a question to me. Let me know if you want me to answer it privately. Otherwise, I'll probably answer it over the air. Because we're in a webinar, we do have the ability, no one has the ability to speak except for me, just because we can't manage all the different Q&A and it kind of can get confusing. So we stick to this format. I apologize. Trust me, it's a little weird to me too. I'm just speaking, feels like I'm speaking to no one sometimes. So I'll keep moving if no one's got any questions. That's what the physician's life income plan is and how it solves for that retirement gap, that problem we have where you can't save enough money because of the limits and restrictions in Social Security and qualified plans. Okay? Now, let's talk about the ACG program specifically. And I mentioned, I'm getting close to the end here, guys. I mentioned I'm trying to get through this quickly. I know you have other things to do, and we can always talk about this again afterwards or offline. But the ACG program itself, so this is what do you have access to because you're an ACG member. So the PLIP, or the Physician's Life Income Plan, is available to ACG members for individual ownership. It does not require corporate ownership or sponsorship. That is rare. These contracts with no surrender charges designed for the accumulation focus are typically corporate-owned contracts. They have to be owned by a corporation for the benefit of some of the key executives. In fact, when you'll see it, when you get one, it even says it right on the contract. It's called corporate-owned incentive life from this particular carrier, because that's how it's designed to be owned. However, this contract allows you as a member of the ACG to own it individually. There doesn't have to be any corporation involved. You can be an employee in a hospital system. You could be a non-partner physician in a large group. You could be a solo practitioner. It doesn't matter. You can own it. You have all the control of the contract, all the same funding advantages, all the same tax advantages you would if you were a large corporation owning these contracts. So that's the key. That's what you're getting here by being an ACG member that you wouldn't get if you weren't. Okay. A couple of little details. It is a full featured plan. This is nothing that's been watered down for this program. This is their full featured contract that's available to corporations and used by corporations worldwide. Again, individual ownership, we talked about that briefly already. Small group plans. So a small group plan might be if you're in a practice and there's 5 or 10 or 20 partners and you all want to participate in something like this. It can be a great opportunity for you to come together as a group and create a supplemental retirement savings vehicle just for the physician. Or you can even include the RNs if you want. You can include anybody. It's up to you who you include. But it gives you the chance to kind of pool all of your assets into a few contracts. And so everybody can contribute different amounts, and they can track, the administrators can track how much each person's account value is worth and track everybody's accounts separately, even though they may be pooled into a few contracts. If you have more than 10 people participating, we get guaranteed issue. This can be huge for groups that may have some older physicians, or maybe some physicians that have some medical conditions that might not allow them to get their own, because this is an insurance contract. So if you're doing it individually owned, it will require life insurance underwriting. However, if you've got a practice or a small group, 10 lives or more, there's no underwriting. It's a guaranteed issue for everybody on the plan. So that can be really valuable, again, for some groups. Now, a lot of groups you might have a few older physicians, some of them in the middle of the career, and some new people, and that's fine. You can put them all on the plan. They can contribute different amounts. The new physicians might only want to put $10,000 a year, $5,000 a year, whatever it is, because they got a lot of other debts and things to deal with. And the older physicians might want to put a lot more in there, and that's fine. It gives that flexibility. Everybody can kind of choose. Like we talked about earlier, no maximum contribution limits like you do in a qualified plan. Really, the sky's kind of the limit. I suppose practically speaking, you're going to be limited by your income. Obviously, you can't put more in here than you make. Okay, so $50,000 individual minimum funding. So if you are not doing a small group plan and you're going to own just a single contract by yourself, there's a minimum funding requirement of $50,000 a year. That has to do with the way the contracts are filed with the state insurance commissioners, and in order to kind of be these corporate-owned life contracts with all these additional features and the early liquidity and the reduction of the surrender charges and things like that, they have the set minimums. So the minimum in these policies is $50,000 a year, which again, for members of this association, even the youngest members, that's probably only going to be maybe 10% of your income, 10, 12% of your income. So this plus your qualified plan starts getting you towards that 15% savings that you ought to be doing for retirement. Small group plans have a $100,000 minimum that's for the whole group. So if there's 10 people, everybody puts 10,000 a year in, you're covered. Or if there's 10 people, one doctor puts in 80 and 4 others put 5, that's fine. You just have to get to 100,000 aggregate minimum for the whole group. Obviously, you can do a lot more than that, but you have to hit that 100,000. Now, these minimums are initial fundings only. They don't have to be met every year. But when you start it with the first year, that needs to be the premium or the funding that goes into the contract. And really, for these to work properly and to work their best, we want to keep the funding as level as possible. We can talk more about that when we're doing individual design for you, but you want to keep the funding fairly level for at least a chunk of years, 5, 6, 7 years. That's kind of how they're designed. Okay, so that's everything. Those are the details for the ACG program. Let's look at a quick example. This might be a little hard to read, and I apologize if it is. I am going to try and annotate so you can watch it here. So this is, let me see if I can pull up my, there we go, spotlight. Okay, nope, that's not the right thing. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see my red cursor there. This was a young, this is an actual quote we ran for a physician. He's young, 36. I show him retiring at 65. We assumed he making 6% a year on his money. I don't know exactly, obviously, these are all hypothetical illustrations. And then we distributed for 15 years during retirement. So he's putting $50,000 a year, that's the minimum, for 7 years. So it's $350,000 total that he would put in for 7 years. And these are built to be funded for in these 7-year chunks. Now, obviously, for 36, we would, of course, advise this client, you're going to want to fund for more than 7 years, so we would build him a laddered contract, which would allow him to keep funding in future years as well. But this is just for numbers and for example purposes, okay? You have $50,000 a year going in. One of the things I want to note here, and I'll show you the money coming out as well in just a second. I had to chop it off here after 64 so that you could read it, otherwise it would be too long and the type or the font would be too small. But what I want you to notice real quick, $50,000 a year, or assuming you make 6%. Now remember, this is an insurance contract, and this is always a question that comes up, well, what are the costs? By paying a bunch of money for insurance. At the end of the first year, he has $52,908 in it. So we assumed he made 6% on $50,000, which should have been $3,000, right? If you do the math, 6% times $50,000 would be $3,000. You'll notice he has $52,908. So there was a cost. There was a cost of insurance there. It was $92. So the costs in these contracts are significantly reduced because they're not intended for insurance. You see, he has a net death benefit here of $1,467,528. It's a weird number because, again, we're lowering that death benefit as low as possible because we don't want high costs, we want low costs. But it is there. So if something did happen to him, even after he's funded all this money, you're going to get a little leverage on your money. Okay, that'll always exist. It's kind of an added benefit. It's not the reason we do these vehicles, but there is a death benefit that does kind of leverage your dollars into 100% tax-free dollars for your beneficiaries if something were to happen. Okay, now I want to show the money coming out. So starting at age 65, this contract allows them to pull out $107,807 a year for 15 years. Okay, so his total funding was $350,000 because of the tax-deferred growth and the tax-free access. He was able to pull out $1.6 million tax-free, right? This is 100% tax-free. So if you think about that, you know, what's that an equivalent of? Well, if you're pulling out $1,617,105, let's say you're at a 35% tax bracket, you're going to divide that by 0.35. No, I did the math wrong there. It's not $4.6 million. That'd be nice if it were, right? But it's significant. It's over three. You know, it's almost $3 million. I apologize for getting my math wrong, but there's a $1.6 million tax-free distribution on $350,000 investment. Now, obviously, two things to keep in mind. He would probably not stop at age 42 when he was funding over here for the $50,000 a year. So that $50,000 would keep going, which would make this number much higher, right? And this number much higher. The other thing to keep in mind here is that this is only $50,000 of funding. That's the minimum. That's why we were just showing you what the minimum would do but really this is probably going to be a larger number. Or if you're older, you know, let's say you're 50 when you're starting your plan, you have fewer years to retire, but you probably have more income as well. And so again, you could fund more money in the early years, allowing you to pull out a lot more distribution. But the point here is the leverage. We turned $350,000 into $1.6 million tax-free in retirement by using this vehicle. And like I said, there's a death benefit along the way, but that's just kind of extra gravy. It's not really what we're focused on. Okay? And as you guys can see, the death benefit actually stays in place all the way until you keep pulling money out, and it even continues to exist. And then it just dies out over time because the cost of insurance keep ticking away even though you've pulled out all your money. And this we just stretched out to age 100 to make sure it never died. There's always a little death benefit left. Okay? That's how that works. Are there any questions? I'm shocked in this group, or I'm worried that there's no questions. Either I'm boring or no one's listening, or I'm really good. You guys are getting it all. Let's hope it's the last one. So it's pretty simple, but that's how it works. It's kind of like a Roth IRA. You put money in early on, let it grow tax deferred, pull it out tax free. The leverage is really valuable. Okay. So let's talk about applications in practice, and we're going to get you guys out of here plenty earlier tonight. So these are different practice types and how it could apply. So if you're in a single specialty practice, obviously individuals, you can own them as an independent policy just on your own. In a group, you could obtain policies as long as one of the group members is an ACG member. So it doesn't have to require every physician in your group or every participant in the program with this policy to be an ACG member. At least one physician has to be an ACG member, okay? Multi-specialty groups, kind of the same thing. Any GIs that are members of the ACG can obtain individual policies for yourself, or if you want to do a group plan, again, as long as one of the group members is an ACG member. And again, guaranteed issue could be available if you're 10 lives or more. If you're in a hospital, health system, or academic system, if you're not an non-ACG members would not be eligible. If you are an ACG member and you're in one of these systems, you could own a plan individually as a person, personal ownership. You couldn't do a small group in this scenario without the kind of sponsorship of your employer. So you couldn't come to me if you worked at Stanford. You couldn't come to me with 9 other physicians that work at Stanford and say, hey, the 10 of us want to do a group plan. We all work at Stanford. Stanford doesn't know anything about it or have anything to do with it. It's just the 10 of us. You could have 10 individual plans. That wouldn't be a problem. But we couldn't do a small group plan because if it's, quote, a group plan with guaranteed issue, it has to be going through the group. So in that case, we could do a program through Stanford or through your hospital or your academic system, but it would have to be coming from them. So you'd have to get us involved with the HR department and in those organizations, and we could try and structure something for you and as many other physicians that want to participate. Okay, and then finally, sole practitioner. Obviously, you're eligible if as long as you're an ACG member. You can own it individually, and your employees will not be eligible to get it, but you would be. Okay. So almost last slide, pretty much the last slide. How do I get more information on this? Just a quick what I need for individual proposals. This is not for the full issuing of a contract for you, but just to show you numbers. I just need to know your name, your date of birth, the state you live in, your annual income, and how much you want to see going into the contract a year for the first 7 years. That's what we'll show you, and it's kind of the starting point to have a deeper conversation about how it works for you and for you to think a little bit more about what you want to do, and then we can fine-tune from there and go into full application. Keep in mind, like I said earlier, this is a life insurance contract, so it does, if it's an individually owned contract, it does require regular life insurance underwriting. So we are going to have to pull medical records. We are going to have to possibly do medical exams depending on how much contract we're doing, but most likely we'll do medical exams. So you got to go through the underwriting process. That can take, 2 to 8 weeks depending on how complicated your medical history is. And then once we get that all complete, then you can be issued a contract. Okay. If you just want to learn more about this, call us, email us, go to the website. There's some more information on there. We're going to continue adding more information. I apologize that it's not fully populated yet because we're trying to roll things out as quickly as we can, get the webinars going as quickly as we can, and the web team is having trouble kind of keeping up. So But we will get this information up there, especially now that this webinar is out there. We're going to get the rest of the information on the Physicians Life Income Plan posted as quickly as possible. But there is some stuff up there. But again, anytime you need anything, email us, acgbenefits@wmsirvine.com. One of us will get back to you right away, usually same day, possibly next day if we're out. I am one of the people that might be responding to you. There are others as well. You can also call us directly. That's our direct phone number. It's an ACG benefits only phone number. It's 949-335-0199. That's answered by our staff during business hours, and if we miss you, leave a message. We'll get back to you that day or the next day. And a quick note, I may say this in every webinar, so you heard it already, I apologize, but I think it's important to always mention. We work for the association or for the college, okay? And by extension, work for you. We are not here to bother you or market to you. Don't be worried if you email us with a question or you call us with a question, you give us your cell phone number, that you're going to get hassled, okay? We are not trying to retrieve your information to constantly bother you with new things. We want to support the college and we want to support you, and so we're here to answer questions. If you express some interest, we will probably follow up a couple times if we haven't heard from you, just because in our experience working with physicians, we realize how busy you are, and that sometimes things get dropped or slip through the cracks, so you don't have time to address them right now. And so a couple weeks later, we might follow up again. If we follow up, but to that same note, if we follow up a couple times so we don't hear back from you, we're going to stop bugging you. Not because we don't care to take care of you, but because we do care to not bother you. And we want to respect our relationship with you and the relationship with the college. And then it's not about hassling you, it's about supporting you. So that's all I'll say about that, but don't be afraid to contact us because, again, like I said, you're not going to go onto some sort of marketing email list, okay? So that is the end. That's all I've got today. This is 5:45. It's pretty good. Left just 15 minutes for Q&A, but the way that you guys have been going so far, I'm assuming this group will not have 15 minutes worth, but I am open and available for any questions you might have. I can go back to any of the slides we looked at previously. Just let me know what you'd like to hear. So if you've got any questions, please shoot me a little note through the Q&A box in the upper left-hand corner. Okay, here's a question. Let's see here. Okay, so if I participate in the Physicians Life Income Plan, does it affect my eligibility to participate in my 401k? No, it does not. They're completely unrelated. So if you are doing a 401k, you can do your full contribution to deferral into your 401k, whether that's $18,000 or $24,000, depending on your age. And you can do whatever you want inside this because it's a non-qualified plan. The two do not have any relation to one another, okay? Okay, next question. Will today's presentation be emailed or available on the web? Yes, we are recording it. It won't be emailed, but we will make it available online. So we will send out a follow-up email. I think it goes out the next day, so I think you get it tomorrow. It might be 2 days from now. So it might be Thursday you get it. But you'll get an email with a link in it, and that link will go to the page where you can view this recorded webinar and the other webinars as well. We've had a recorded webinar on disability, surplus disability, as well as a webinar on the 401k platform. I will hang tight for another couple minutes because if there's any more questions, I know that they pop into your head sometimes a little later. I don't want to end the call too soon, but if we don't have any for another minute or two, we will we'll end it. Another question, what are the costs of the account since it is an insurance contract? Are we paying insurance costs? It is an insurance contract, and there are insurance costs, but like I mentioned earlier, it's a reduced death benefit as low as possible. It's designed for this accumulation, so it's designed to have the lowest cost structure it can. And we could walk through that. We walk through it in detail with you when we're doing individual plan design for you. So we would lay out exactly what the costs are, show you year over year what the cost is, so that you're very clear in understanding what they are. I can't give you just a general rule of thumb because they vary so differently primarily based on your age, sometimes on your health underwriting, and as well as how much you're funding into the contract. So there's a number of variables that make it hard to estimate, generally speaking, but the costs are low. I mean, if you wanted to compare it to putting it inside a managed money contract, it's similar and sometimes even less than it might be inside a regular asset management account where you've got an advisor that you're paying to manage it. You're paying their fee plus the investment fees, not to mention you're paying taxes. I mean, even forgetting about the taxes, it can still be cheaper, but when you add taxes on top of that, it's not even close. So hope that answers your question. I apologize, I can't be more specific, but like I said, if you want to look at a proposal for on your own life or in your own account, we can show that to you, and we'll show you those costs in great detail. Okay, any other questions for me? Here's another question. What's involved in the underwriting? I mentioned earlier, it's life insurance underwriting. So if you've ever done that before, you're going to probably have a medical exam. We're going to send an examiner out to see you. They're going to take your blood, urine, ask you some medical questions. There's an application process where we'll ask some medical questions, get names and contact info of your primary care physicians. We'll pull medical records and get APSs, and then that's primarily what it is. If there's some more detail we need in there, then we can reach out to you directly to get that, but that's kind of the standard process. And again, I've seen those done as quickly as a couple weeks, or sometimes they can take a month or two, just depending on the level of complexity of your medical history. Here's another question. Okay, so this showed funding for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, do you have to do underwriting again? No, not necessarily. Usually what we would do is we would kind of plan out what your intended funding would be, and we would design the contracts to allow you to do that. So if you come to me and say, oh, I've got 15 years left, I'm going to probably want to fund this for, we would design it to have 15 years of funding capacity, but what we would do is we would only pull the trigger on the first 7 years funding capacity to keep that death benefit low, and at the end of those 7 years, we would implement the next chunk of capacity, so we can keep funding it, but we're not paying for all that extra capacity in the early years. Again, keeping those costs down as low as possible. Yeah. Hope that answered that question. Got one more here. Looks like it says, do you have clients? Make sure I'm trying to understand the question. Okay, it looks like you're asking, do we have clients that fund significantly more than the $50,000 a year? Yes. This is, like I said, the nice thing about this contract, I'll go back up to the slide here that showed this. So this is that liquidity, right? $50,000 in, $52,900 in cash value at the end of the year, assuming you made money in the market. 1550 is 100,000 in, you got 107,900 in there. So you see that this is always higher than your contributions, assuming that the market's been positive. The liquidity is instantaneous. We actually had a client that he put in about, I think he put in $175,000. One check when we first opened the contract, and he had some personal situations come up, and 6 to 8 months later, he needed a lot of money back out of the contract, and it was available to him, 100%, more than he had put in because he made some money in the market, and so he had all of that money available to him. There's no surrender charges. It was fully liquid. So that is why people use these contracts with a lot of money. I mean, we have plenty of clients that are putting hundreds of thousands, and even some people putting, getting up into the 7 figures of money into these contracts because they're fully liquid. They can get back at the money anytime, but they're putting it into a tax-deferred bucket, so it's not taxable. And in a lot of states, like I mentioned earlier, it's asset protected. So it's a great way to protect assets and to allow for tax-deferred growth without losing control over your money. So yeah, we have clients that put quite a bit of money in the contracts. That's that question, and I guess a long answer. I apologize. Okay, any other questions? Again, I'll hang tight for another minute or so here. Okay, here's another question. If you have to pull money out early, does it terminate the plan? Not necessarily. So it depends on if you're pulling all of the money out. So that would be the only thing that would terminate the plan is if you pulled 100% of the money out. That would close the contract, which you probably want to avoid doing. You know, that's not what these are designed to do. They're not just bank accounts. You have liquid access to them as you need them, but they're designed for long-term planning and long-term growth. So in that client situation, what we actually did in the example I just gave, he actually borrowed it out, because once you have the money in these contracts, you can borrow it out basically from yourself and leave it in the contract, growing tax deferred, and you're going to pay, you know, between 0% and 1% net loan rates, depending on what stage in the contract you're on. The first 7-10 years, I think it's 1% spread, and then after that it's 0% spread. So you're borrowing incredibly cheaply rate. So if you need the money for a short-term type of situation, we would often recommend borrow it out and then you can put it back later. If everything went to it fell apart and you needed to just close everything and take all the money out, you could do that, but that would close the contract, and we would want to avoid that. But because that could possibly trigger some taxation on your growth. You'll never get taxed on the funding you've put into it, but if you've got growth and you close the contract completely, you could get taxed on it. So I hope that answers your question. It doesn't terminate the plan, it stays alive unless you pull all of it out. And the other thing too is if you know that there's going to be a change in your life and there's going to be a change in the amount you want to fund for whatever reason, you can change that funding. And you can come to us and say, I know we initially planned for $200,000 of funding a year. Let's say we did that for a year or two. And you can come to me and say, you know what, my son or daughter has decided to become an artist, and bless them, and I love them, but it looks like I'm gonna have to support them. And so I can't put $250,000, I need to put $100,000 a year into this thing. That's fine, we can change that. And what we would do then, if we know it's gonna stay, it's a permanent change in funding, we can lower that death benefit even more to keep your costs down. So it stays a super efficient contract, costs are still super low, and you're funding what you need to fund. So if that answers that question. Any other questions? Okay, it's looking like we don't have any more questions. 5:55, in under the buzzer here. Kept you guys less than an hour. I appreciate you sticking with me. Again, let me go back to the screen real quick here. It's got our contact info. If you need more information, please call us, shoot us an email, or check out the website. And we are happy to help in any way we can. Again, my name is Ian Ellis. If you reach out on this, I might be the one contacting you, and I look forward to working with you or any of the other team members here at WMS that work on the ACG benefits program. Okay? Thanks so much. Have a great evening.